ॐ यो देव सवितास्माकं धियो धर्मादिगोचराः प्रेरयेत्तस्य यद्भर्गः तद्वरेण्यम् उपास्महे।
सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ गुरुब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुदेवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयामदेवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः यशेम देवहितं यदायुः। स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृत्रश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीमष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम्। ॐ वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। So we are continuing our discussion of the chapter 5 going on. We will re-look at the verses we did till now. After explaining the approaches to the truth or the way of making oneself available to the truth through the Karma Yoga or through Sannyasa, there are two ways in which the knowledge of the self can be perfected. So it is Nishtha, it is not the way of acquiring the knowledge. So the way of acquiring the knowledge is through teaching, but the availability of the mind to the knowledge, making the mind entirely available for the knowledge, not allowing the mind to be carried away by distractions and not allowing the mind to be caught in the different patterns of one's own likes and dislikes and preferences and one's own short-sighted vision and one's own conditioning, etc. So to removing all that and purifying the mind for the sake of steadiness in the knowledge. Sthita prajna means whose knowledge is steady, clear, without doubt. For this there are two ways of dedicating oneself. One can dedicate oneself through the process of Karma Yoga, or one can dedicate oneself through the process of renunciation. Then after knowing all this from the fourth chapter, Arjuna asked Lord Krishna, see, you are telling that both of these are going to take me to the same result, but please tell me which one of them is better, because I want to follow only the best. So then when Arjuna asks this, because for example, for any purpose, if there are two approaches given, one always tends to think that approach which looks more romantic, more exotic, to be the better approach. This is a standard problem in the human psyche. For example, there are two people. One person I am saying is enlightened master. So there are two enlightened masters. I tell you, you go to the if you go to the piazza, near the piazza, there are two enlightened masters. Then you have to recognize them and give an assignment. So in the whole of piazza, there was one person who is sitting straight with very minimal, very austere clothing and these lines. Like So you found the first guy, he's enlightened. So then another person, you are not able to find it. Everybody is looking normal, you don't know who is enlightened, who is not enlightened. Then I tell you that, that gypsy who is selling flowers there, that person is enlightened. Come on, he cannot be enlightened. How can he be enlightened? He is just normal like everybody else, and if you want to, if you buy the flower, he cheats you like any other gypsy. And then he is trying to act smart and get some small profit. He is just like any other flower vendor, he is a flower vendor. So how come he is enlightened or not? How do you know? You will never know. That is why. So if they say this person, he got enlightenment while being devoted to Karma Yoga and while perfecting the mind through the process of Karma Yoga, and he arrived at enlightenment when he was exposed to the teaching and continues to be a flower vendor. This person was a Kalugar and he was practicing a lot of austerities and everything, and then he also got enlightenment and he perfects the enlightenment by sitting meditation. Okay? So these two people, which one looks more exotic for the purpose of this great enlightenment? Obviously the meditating Kalugar. So similarly, if you understand the virtue of courage, strength, valor, and these qualities of power and conquering the enemies, you will always think of one very tough cavalier who is wielding the sword and going. It's very romantic. But if you actually think of a secret agent on the streets who is not at all visible, but he is very important game changer. Nobody knows that this fellow is even knows some basic martial arts. Okay, and this fellow is very important game changer, kingmaker. This person is never in the limelight. He is in the background. He is doing all this stuff, but it's very important. Only those who really know what is what can recognize this person. Others will not see. So would you like to be like that? So somebody who is motivated by courage and strength and desire to protect the world. So then immediately the stereotype cavalier comes. No? So similarly, for every virtue there is a stereotype, which the mind wants. If you in our childhood they will ask you, identify the different people. There will be one with a kind of a frock, and I remember when I was in school in India there are some stereotypes. Here I don't know. A lady with a sari and with a red color umbrella and with a small cane in the hand, kindergarten teacher. And then you have a policeman, means you have a uniform something. Then you have somebody with a crown sitting on a throne like this with the great robes. Immediately you will say king. So like this you have different stereotypes for different things. So similarly, we are all used to thinking that freedom, enlightenment, spiritual illumination means in India you are somebody with a loincloth or a naked man wandering mendicant with a lot of beard and a lot of hair, or sitting under a tree like this. That is called enlightenment. In the West they may have some other idea depending on your exposure. So the tendency of people is always to look for what looks more appealing and romantic. This is the tendency of the mind. So that is not the way to go. There can always be a factor for motivation. You can get motivated by the stereotypes, but you don't need to define an approach, you don't need to define something based on the stereotype, because most likely it is not like that. It is like when somebody went and saw Swami Vivekananda, the very famous monk from India, who brought the Indian perspective on the spirituality, who popularized it. One of the most important people who popularized it in the West. He is wearing a turban. Swami Vivekananda is like that. So he wears a turban, orange robes, and like this very heroic appearance in India. This was Swami Vivekananda. So somebody they saw this picture of Swami Vivekananda in all the public relations and everything. They want to see Swami Vivekananda. He was wearing one dhoti, not even a shirt, He was just a plain body with a lot of loose fat and everything. He's not like Arnold Schwarzenegger, not an exercise man. He's a monk who is very busy all the time working for the public. He has no time to take care of his body. Of course, he has that effulgence and everything. So he had a shaved head, which his little hair has grown, and for 2 weeks unshaved stubble beard, and everything, and then he had one towel like this and one another towel on the body. They went to see him in Belur Mat. He came to us, could not believe what? Because he's waiting to see that person with the turban and with all these great robes who attended the Parliament of Religions, no? It's like Swami Vivekananda. So can he remain like this all the time with the turban? He cannot remain. At least he has to take bath, he has to remove the turban. So it is like, when one always goes with a stereotype, you might lose the main point and get carried away by the appearances. Similarly, this is the error that everybody makes. We all think that perfection in enlightenment can only be got by renouncing everything and sitting in some forest and contemplating and absorbing the mind in samadhi and realizing the 7 chakras and kundalini and whatever, all that we have heard. We think that is the only way enlightenment can be achieved. And if you pitch that against a life of karma yoga, where you look like any other ordinary fellow, which is not very marketable at all, then if you see which one of this is better, obviously we will tend to think that the way of the monk of renunciation and of austerity and the person who is shining with the power of austerity in the middle of the forest in a cave, that is always very appealing. We might think that is anyway, that is more powerful. That is the better way for enlightenment than this. That is not so. You will be surprised by Krishna's answer. So Arjuna asked, please tell me which is better. And Krishna said, Karma Yoga is better. So this is something very, very difficult to swallow for a stereotype thinking. And he also says why Karma Yoga is better. So this was what we saw in the last class. We will just re-look at those verses and then we will continue the discussion. Arjuna said, Krishna, you praise renunciation of actions and also Karma Yoga. Tell me definitely that which is better of the two. Sri Bhagavad Vacha, he says, the Lord said, both renunciation of action and performance of action as yoga, both of them lead to liberation. But of these two, the performance of action as yoga is better than renunciation of action and taking to a life of formal renunciation. Performance of action in the attitude of yoga is better than a life of renunciation. And then we had a lot of discussion on what does it actually mean, for whom he is saying. We'll re-look into that and then we'll proceed. Then he is starting to define who is a person who is renunciate. So what is this renunciation? Is renunciation only the external signs of renunciation, the marks of renunciation, like a hawker robe, having a bowl? Each tradition has its marks of renunciation. In Orthodox, renunciation means wearing a black robe and one cap. You know that is a kalugar. In India, in Hinduism, it is a hawker robe. Then if you have one stick with a little, one small orange color, what is that? Ochre colored little, like a small flat one cloth tied to the end, and you have a stick and you go, you are called as a very serious monk, called Dandi Sannyasi. So it is called a Hamsa. There is one sign of commitment to the knowledge. So like this, we have different signs in different religions. If you see Jains, a monk is somebody who is walking naked and he is covering only his mouth. And then there is another monk, another person who is wearing only white robes. Like this, you have different signs of renunciation in different traditions. So now, he's saying it is not about these signs. The spirit of renunciation, what is it? It is not, you cannot, just because a person has the signs of renunciation, it need not mean that person is having the spirit of renunciation within. So what is more important? This does not mean the signs or the marks of renunciation according to a tradition are not important. They are also important. But what is more important, what is the point here is not the marks of renunciation. What is the point here is the attitude of renunciation. What is that? A person who neither hates nor longs for anything should be known as always a renunciate. Arjuna, the one who is free from opposites like likes and dislikes, pain and pleasure, happiness, sorrow, etc., is indeed effortlessly released from bondage. That means the one who does not allow the thinking to come under the sway of varying experiences of life. The experience of life should not disturb your commitment to valid knowledge. If your intellect is, if your buddhi, if your ego principle, if your I am, if your sense of self and your intellect thinking is not affected by the different opposing influences of life, you are able to maintain your inner stability and equanimity across the varying opposing experiences of life, such a person is effortlessly released from bondage. So this is the quality that is more important, which he said here. And then only these childish people who do not know, children here means the one who has not really understood what it all means. That means a person whose thinking is very naive. The children who do not know, only them, but not the wise people, argue that only those people with childish, with naive thinking, argue that knowledge and karma yoga are different. The person who follows even one of the two properly gains the result of both. So now we will go into the analysis. So the first he said, renunciation of action and performance of action as yoga lead to liberation, but of these two, the performance of action as yoga is better than the renunciation of action. The main point here we discussed based on the commentary of Sri Shankaracharya is, this is referring to the person who is not enlightened. A person has not yet acquired self-knowledge. The person is desiring self-knowledge. So when a person is desiring self-knowledge, what would be the committed way of life for that person in order to be completely available for self-knowledge, so that self-knowledge can take place? How a person can prepare oneself to receive the knowledge of the self. So how the person should be committed, what kind of life this person must live. Should the person live a life of active life, backed by the attitude of yoga, or should the person live a life of renunciation? This question does not arise for a person who already has knowledge. This is what Acharya points out in the commentary. So the context here is, are we talking about the lifestyle to be taken by an enlightened person? Because this discourse often comes. You may be enlightened, but Bhagavad Gita tells you to do action. You must always be busy in action. Whatever the state you might have attained, the life of karma yoga is better than sannyasa. So this kind of discourse is not for a person who is considered to have self-knowledge. You can never certify a person as enlightened or not. It is not possible. Only that person knows, God knows. Nobody else knows. Okay, and that person also will not say, I am self-realized. If you say, I am self-realized, that means you are not. Because when you really understand what is the truth, telling I am self-realized is as stupid as telling I am not self-realized. So the person cannot lay claim to being self-realized or enlightened. He can talk about enlightenment. From the way in which the person talks about self-realization or enlightenment, you can understand, okay, this person seems to have understood. Because it talks in the exact language of the Shastra. So, if a person has self-knowledge, if you consider a person has self-knowledge, which means, self-knowledge means the person understands, I am not the doer, I am not the enjoyer. The person very clearly understands, I am not defined by the actions of the body and the mind. When the person clearly understands that, I am not the doer, I am the universal consciousness which always remains the same. No matter what happens to the body and the mind, such a person will not think, should I renounce or should I do? Because this person neither renounces nor does. Only if you are a doer, if you consider yourself to be a doer, then you have to renounce. And the act of formal renunciation, committing to a life of being a monk or a nun, committing to the life of renunciation, a formal commitment is an action. I have to go sit in front of the altar of fire, and then I have to renounce all the wealth, I have to renounce my cattle, I have to renounce my attachments, I have to renounce my religious rituals, I have to renounce all my other commitments and let me be committed only to the knowledge. So and then I have to renounce my competitiveness. You take the vow that you will not compete with anybody, and then you show your hand of protection to all the beings, starting from the insects up to Indra, who is the king of God. You say, I give you I show you, let me I am always there for the welfare of everybody, you commit for the welfare of everybody. So there are a lot of formal procedures that go into the process of renunciation. So now a person, so this is also an action. So a person who considers oneself to be the Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, one who considers oneself to be the eternal, self-existent, infinite, unbounded, absolute reality, which is pervading everything, that in which everything lives, that from which everything came about, that in which everything is lived, everything is sustained, that into which everything goes back, that is Brahman and I am that. When a person understands that, the question of renouncing or not renouncing does not arise. So that whole concept of is an enlightened person worried whether to renounce or not itself is ridiculous. So this discussion here does not point out, or it is not meant to be applied for a person who has self-knowledge. It only means a person who does not have self-knowledge. Now, when a person does not have self-knowledge, the question is, how can I keep my mind disciplined in order to imbibe the truth about myself when it is taught? So how can I prepare myself for self-knowledge? So the whole question about living an active life in the spirit of yoga or living a life of renunciation, which one is better? The whole question is only about what is better for me to be ready for knowledge. When this is the angle of discussion, then definitely Karma Yoga is better than Sannyasa. Why? Because a person who lives a life of yoga attains the equanimity required for knowledge very quickly. Viveka, Vairagya, Mokshutva, Samadhi Sambhati. That is discrimination, dispassion, the burning desire for liberation, and the different qualities beginning with mind control, sense control, etc. All these are very quickly attained by a person devoted to the attitude of yoga across all actions in an active life than a forced lifestyle of a renunciant. When a person takes to a forced lifestyle of a renunciant without knowledge, then the life of renunciation becomes a struggle. It is not easy for anybody. So a life of renunciation is not a general recommendation. It is not a common pill that can be taken off the counter. So when I am running a pharmacy, I cannot keep all the pills in the counter. I cannot keep sleeping pills and very powerful antibiotics and other things depending on the regulation. Only certain pills like paracetamol or something I can keep them. All the pills I cannot keep as off the counter pills. So when I give a general instruction for everybody, I have to take into account the inherent flaws in the human nature. When I take into account the inherent flaws in the human nature, it is better to live an active life devoted to the attitude of yoga for the purpose of preparing oneself rather than pushing oneself to renounce and struggling in a life of formal renunciation and attaining the readiness of mind, and living an active life and attaining the readiness of mind by devotion to yoga. Between these two, for the unenlightened person, a life of karma yoga is better. That is the context. So always, every recommendation in the scripture is to be understood exactly according to the context in which it is discussed. When we miss the context, we will miss the whole spirit of the teaching, and it can lead to unending confusion. So one of the main problems with Buddhism is they have practices for lay practice. They have the idea of lay practitioners, they have the idea of renunciant practitioners, semi-renunciant, full renunciant. They have all this, but if you see the teaching is always a generic glorification of renunciation. There is no teaching of yoga or in everyday life. Of course, they teach dharma and all that, but it is not complete because a person who is devoted to an active life needs to have an active relationship with Ishvara. And it is not asserted. Everybody need not become a renunciant. It is not asserted. But renunciation is given a lot of importance, and because of that, common people get confused a lot. And it always looks like, no, I am not okay, only a sannyasi is okay. No, only a monk or only a nun, only a renunciant who is always doing sitting meditation is okay. This kind of tendency is there for people to think when you paint one teaching across for all people. So the teaching is always according to the nature of the one who is taught. Who is asking the question, it's very important that what is the question. That is why in the Vedic approach, there is a very important quality called Adhikari Bheda. This is a key word. What decides the kind of teaching given for a student? What is the factor, decisive factor? What decides what kind of teaching a student gets? It is called Adhikari Bheda. The clear understanding of the aptitude of the student. What is the student qualified to receive? They say, offer based on the nature of the vessel. If you have a plastic vessel, you cannot put a hot liquid unless it is microwave grade. Okay? So if there is a normal plastic vessel, a very burning hot liquid, you are not supposed to put. When you buy a vessel, there are recommendations. You cannot put any kind of liquid in that. If you have a copper vessel, you cannot put a very acidic liquid into it. You can only drink some water and some pH neutral liquids. So like that, a person cannot receive everything. Every person is qualified for something. So based on the need of the person, the teaching is to be packaged. The teaching, it is simply because and there is nothing called higher or lower. See, there are two things. Either the person understands self-knowledge, or the person does not have self-knowledge. There is ignorance and knowledge. Now, knowledge cannot be given unless the person is prepared. If a person is not prepared and then you push the knowledge all the time, keep talking from the from the level of knowledge which is meant for a prepared person, the unprepared person will become worse. He will get more confused and he will lose whatever the person is having. This is what is happening in Neo-Vedanta. In Neo-Vedanta, the main problem is because the Adhikari Bheda is not there. Adhikari Bheda means the teaching is not presented according to the nature of the disciple. The same thing for everybody. And everybody is asked to live up to that standard. So this is a problem. It is a fundamental flaw in the Western thinking. In the Western thinking, you have one absolute certain stuff, certain thing. This is the certain absolute thing. This is what it is. So everybody has to adopt to that. And everybody is struggling. So this does not apply here. In the traditional Vedantic teaching, the approach of Vedanta, traditional approach of Vedanta, it is very, very student centric in the sense Adhikari means are you qualified? What are you qualified for? So this is the whole approach. So if this approach is not obviously discussed, so this approach is woven into the methodology of teaching. So only when you are exposed to a proper teaching over a period of time, you will understand this. So or when somebody is telling it obviously, when somebody is presenting this concept obviously, then you will come across this. But the main scripture will not discuss this. There are these supporting scriptures which talk about the methodology, which talk about how to present it. There are scriptures which talk about what are the rules regarding reaching out to a student and things like this. So it is always says, for example, if you take Ganapati Atharva Sirsha, there is a text which we always Namaste Ganapati Tvameva Pratyaksham Tattvamasi, we always chant that. So in that it says, do not reveal this to a person who is not a committed disciple. A person who is not a committed disciple should not be taught taught the wisdom of Ganapati Atharva Sirsha Upanishad. Should not be taught to a person who is not a committed disciple. Why is it? Then you will say this is Brahminical exclusivism. They are trying to cut off the spiritual knowledge from the ordinary folks and trying to keep it only for an exclusive audience. It is not like that. It is like if you are not prepared for a certain treatment, the treatment might not work in the way it should work. It might become counterproductive. So everything has a qualified recipient. For example, yoga. The practice of yoga talks about certain rules. You should follow certain rules and all that. But it does not require you to have a pre-qualification. You don't need to be qualified to come to yoga. You must just be ready and willing to enter the practice of yoga. That is why the Yoga Sutra starts. Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Now the exposition of yoga. But there is something called Dharma Sutra. There is a set of sutras, Jaimini Sutras, which talk about what are all the rules and what are all the different aspects of following the ritualistic religion. There it says, Athatho Dharma Jignasa. Now, and what is the second now meaning after the required qualifications, after inquiring on what is Dharma? Not everybody is allowed to inquire into the nature of Dharma, because to understand what is Dharma is not easy. It requires a certain preparedness. Similarly, the knowledge of oneself as the universe, it requires a certain preparedness. And that preparedness is what, to get prepared, you don't need to be anybody. Whatever you are, wherever you are, in whatever level you are, you can be accepted for the purpose of preparing yourself. But this aspect of Adhikari Beda, the discretion of what is to be revealed for who, what is befitting who, what fits who. Sannyasa does not fit a person who is not a knower for all practical purposes. If there are exceptional people who are able to take to a life of renunciation before knowledge, like Lord Buddha, he took to a life of renunciation before he was enlightened, because he wanted to find out what is the source of dukkha and how to remove dukkha. That was his question, through which he arrived at the truth. Because you need to have a well thought over question. That was his question. So this obviously says he was not enlightened when he left the palace. But it is an exception. Not everybody can take to that and continue the dedication, because sannyasa is very difficult to attain without the preparation one gets in the life of karma yoga. So that is a teaching. So because of this factor, because of this fact of life, that a life of renunciation without knowledge is very difficult to maintain unless you are prepared through many lives living a life of karma yoga. One cannot become a renunciant so easily. So let us not try to push ourselves towards renunciation. Rather, let us withdraw our mind and bring ourselves back to the attitude of yoga across every situation in life. Whenever the mind goes away, dragged by desire, dragged by aversion, let me bring the mind back to objectivity and the attitude of yoga, which is relating to everything as the Lord, and doing the action as an offering to the Lord. So this yogic attitude frees me gradually from the clutches of subjectivity that is not healthy. The unhealthy subjectivity that interferes in the reality of life, that alters the reality of life in a way that is not good for me. So what is this error that is in the mind? Shoka moha. Shoka is the sorrow, moha is delusion. So I create pain for myself because of all kinds of imaginations and projections centered on I am the doer, I am the enjoyer. And moha is the delusion of considering what is not me as me, and then getting attached to things and then projecting my own fancies on a reality. So because of this, one gets into the cycle of suffering. The cycle of suffering is purely a product of ignorance and habitual error, nothing else. Reality is not suffering. Reality is Ananda. Wherever you look is only Ananda. There is no suffering in reality. That is why liberation while you are alive is possible. A person who is liberated while alive is completely in Ananda, is completely one with the sense of completeness and fullness across all situations. The person does not experience sorrow. Tarati shokam atmavita, the one who knows the self crosses over the ocean of misery. The person does not experience, experientially there is no experience, absolutely no experience of sorrow for a person who clearly understands the nature of oneself. Which means, in reality, there is no suffering. Suffering is a consequence of ignorance and the conditioned habit patterns of the mind. So every time you experience suffering, may you understand it is a consequence of some wrong understanding in your mind. If your mind is devoted to the reality of yourself, you will not experience suffering. So let us not consider the world is a product, all world is suffering, all life is suffering. This is a very wrong discourse. This is not correct. Life is not suffering, life is Brahman. Life is Ananda. Everything is completeness. Purnamada, Purnamidam, everything is Purnam, completeness. Suffering is a consequence of ignorance. Since the mind is addicted to this and it is not free from ignorance, the forced renunciation may not work. It is better to decondition oneself over a period of time. And when the mind is ready and when the self-knowledge comes, if one has to renounce, it is better to renounce after knowledge rather than before knowledge. That is the advice of the Shastra. Here in Bhagavad Gita, also we should take into context, this is my addition. I think it also, because, usually what they say, strictly speaking, in Upanishadic context or in the Vedic, in the yugas, previous yugas, because we don't say Vedic time, every time is Vedic time. So we cannot use this rhetoric that during the Vedic age, then the Puranic age, this is the wrong rhetoric. Every age is Vedic age, now it's also Vedic age. Veda is knowledge, which age is not fit for knowledge? Every era is fit for knowledge. So every era is Vedic era. But we can say Yuga, during the times when the virtue was maximum in society, during Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, during those times, it was easy, because people were very strong of virtue inside, it was easy for them to renounce. The moment the mind gets the question, what is beyond death, what is before birth, and what is the truth of existence, what is that by knowing which everything can be known, like this there are certain legendary questions. Once the mind picks up one of these questions as very important, the person leaves everything and goes to the forest and meditates and ponders over that and finds a teacher and serves a teacher and learns. So immediately the person renounces. That is why they say, Sanyastas Shravanam Kurti. May you renounce, Shravanam Kurya. May you renounce and then listen to Vedanta. So renunciation precedes listening to Vedanta classically. But this Bhagavad Gita is coming just before Kali Yuga is starting, at the end of Dwapara Yuga. So it takes into account a lot of human flaws that are not discussed, that are not taken, that are not assumed, that are all, your maturity is taken for granted. In Upanishads and in the older the literature you go, your maturity is taken for granted. In Vedanta, your maturity is taken for granted. So you don't assume for every human flaw. But in Bhagavad Gita, it is in the middle of a battlefield. In the end of Dwapara Yuga, when there is a fight between virtue and vice, such kind of fights don't exist in Satya Yuga. There is nobody who will want to grab another person's kingdom and fight against your own brother. These kind of things don't exist. But once it has started, already the corruption has come into the consciousness of people. So, taking into account the common human flaws, it is advisable to devote oneself to a life of Karma Yoga. 3150 BC, this is the situation. So what about our situation now? So obviously, a life of Karma Yoga, devoted to Karma Yoga, is better than a life of renunciation for the purpose of self-purification, which is absolutely essential for self-knowledge. Once self-knowledge has taken place, whether the body and the mind is living a life of Karma Yoga or it is living a life of renunciation does not matter. So this question does not arise for an enlightened person. This question is only for an unenlightened person who is to be ready for knowledge, for that Karma Yoga is better. That is the context here. Then now when he is going into the discussion of what are the qualities, the naive people who are not wise, not the wise people, but only those naive people argue that knowledge and Karma Yoga are different. The person who follows even one of these properly gains the result of both. Here, knowledge and Karma Yoga. Knowledge here means sannyasa. Okay? Sankhya Yoga Prutak Balaha Pravadanti Na Panditaha Ekam Apyasthitaha Samyak Ubhayor Vindate Phalam. See, Sankhya Yoga, these are the two things, the technical words, Sankhya and Yoga. Sankhya means the approach, pure commitment to knowledge as an exclusive pursuit. There is no other pursuit in life, which is basically listening reflections. It means a life of renunciation, monk, or a life of yoga. Karma Yoga means I am devoted to different dharmas, different actions, in the spirit of yoga. Now, these two are one. Means what? These two are obviously different. How can these two be one? These two are one with respect to the result that they will give you. When you bring in the yogic attitude in every action, you will develop equanimity. When you are devoted to the discipline of a renunciant's life, there also you will develop equanimity and purity of mind. That is also purifying. That is also developing equanimity. There also one rises above the likes and dislikes. Yes, that is one approach. Both of these bring in the purity of mind required for knowledge. That is why both give you the same result. If there is knowledge, an active life devoted to Karma Yoga becomes a life of Nididhyasana, where every action is a context where I can reconfirm my knowledge. Every action, every active situation of the body and the mind, every situation of life becomes an opportunity for me to be more established in the knowledge, be more committed in the knowledge. If I have knowledge. If I don't have knowledge, every situation becomes an opportunity to free myself from my conditionings and habit patterns. Similarly, a discipline of renunciant lifestyle it is obvious, because a lifestyle of renunciant, the way of life of a renunciant with all the vows and everything, obviously it disciplines and purifies the mind. So that question does not arise. So both of them give the same result. The wise people know this. That means what is happening in the back end is very important, not what is the appearance in the front end. In the front end, one may be active or one may be renunciant. In the back end, one achieves the same purity if one brings the attitude of yoga into the active life. So it is not simply an active life. See, the usual error is, even by doing one's duty, one can attain perfection. This is a very common translation which is given by pop teaching, this pop spirituality. People talk, this you find very much in India. What Bhagavad Gita says, Bhagavad Gita talks about karma. Bhagavad Gita tells you to do your duty. No. Bhagavad Gita talks about jnana. Bhagavad Gita talks about self-knowledge. It does not talk about doing your duty. Bhagavad Gita talks about what is the attitude you must cultivate while doing your duty. Bhagavad Gita doesn't say do your duty. Do your duty, Dharma Shastra says, Manu Dharma Shastra says, all of them say, everybody knows one should do your duty. If you don't do your duty, it's going to itch inside. If you don't fix your cupboard, which is a mess, it is going to itch inside you all the time when you are in office, you are in college or wherever you go. When you go to the party without washing the vessels, at the end of the party, oh my God, I have to wash all the vessels. Because you want to come and lie down in the house. The moment you enter the house, you see the vessel, mountain of vessels in front of you. So you have to wash. So if you have done your duty, the life becomes more smooth. This everybody knows. Nobody needs to tell you that you have to do your duty. Because the moment you try to bypass your duty, you will end up with some kind of itch inside, what is called as guilt. The sense of omission, I have not done what I am supposed to do. Or if you transgress and do what you are not supposed to do, what is not your duty. What is dharmic transgression? If you do something adharmic, obviously you have the guilt of doing what you are not supposed to do. This everybody knows. This is common sense. You don't need any great Shastra to come and tell you to do your duty. But what should be your attitude while doing the duty? I am a very dutiful person. Gone. Then you will develop a very dutiful ego. And that very dutiful ego is more binding than a casual ego. So the problem is, it's better than a casual ego in the sense that you develop some concentration, etc. But it is also equally binding like a casual, non-dutiful ego. So Bhagavad Gita does not say, do your duty. By doing your duty, you will attain the same perfection as what you will attain by renunciation. No, it is not being said here. What is said here is, while doing your duty, if you bring in the attitude of yoga, you will attain the same perfection as what a renunciant attains. The attitude of yoga that backs up your actions, that is the subject matter here, not the action itself. Please understand it clearly. Okay? That is why yoga and jnana are one, means they are one in their purpose, in the result that they will give you. And the end that is gained by the sannyasins is also reached by the karma yogis. The one who sees knowledge and karma yoga as one, that person really sees the truth. The one who sees knowledge and Karma Yoga as one means both are the same with respect to the result they produce. That's what it means here. They both are one in what they give the individual. That way they are one. Then, here comes the main point. Sanyasastu mahabaho dukkam aptum ayogataha yoga yukto muni brahma nachirena adhigacchati. Renunciation of action, that is formal renunciation, taking to the vows of formal renunciation, Arjuna, is very difficult to accomplish without Karma Yoga. If you go to Haridwar, North India, banks of Ganga, Rishikesh, Haridwar, there is a festival called Kumbh Mela. One of the greatest religious festivals, the biggest religious festival in the world actually. It is not talked like this. Everybody thinks Christmas is the biggest religious festival, Pope giving discourse, Kumbh Mela is the biggest religious festival in the world, where you have millions and millions of people attending in one city. In a matter of 1 month. There are some 2-3 days when some 10-15 million people will come into one city. This is one of the biggest events, religious events in the world. In this Kumbh Mela, you have a lot of monastic heads, the heads of different monasteries. They will set up their stall like exhibition, and then they will, there are a lot of things, that are dharmic activities that are going on, and there is the time to initiate people into sannyasa, to get new disciples and things like this. So all the frustrated people who want to become monk, they will find out, they will catch hold of some monk and then some organization which wants to say, no, we have initiated 1,000 monks. So it becomes organizational dharma, expansionist, my organization versus that organization. Our monastery versus their monastery. Who is promoting dharma more? It's a competition. It's all understood. It's all part of active life. So now, the organizational politics, when it comes in, many organizations are very keen to initiate people into sannyasa. So it's very easy to take sannyasa. If you go to Rishikesh and if you find the right monastery, if you give enough money, if it is a bigger monastery, you have to give more money because there is the stamp of authenticity there. Now, if I have to take the words of renunciation from Sringeri Shankaramat, I will not get it. It's not easy. They will ask you to go through 1 year of Veda Dhyanam and this and that. They will not give you. Very serious places, they will try to send you away as much as possible when you want to take renunciation. So somewhere renunciation is given for a ransom so easily. That means the place is a little more or less. So there are a lot of people take renunciation. It's a lot of Westerners take to life of sannyasa. It does not apply for them. Actually, the initiation into the formal monkhood, the renunciation into the formal sannyasa under Shankara order does not apply for Westerners. It is technically incorrect to initiate an outsider from the Vedic culture who has not grown up in the Vedic culture, for that person to take the vows of formal renunciation under the Shankara order is ridiculous actually. It is not only that it is not only applicable, it is inapplicable, it is ridiculous. So there are a lot of people take and it becomes like an accomplishment. Women also take. Women are not supposed to take sannyasa. The vows of formal renunciation are not meant for women. It is a modern reformist sannyasa missionary activity that is going on now. A woman cannot get monk initiation, become a nun in a formal, full-fledged, perfectly traditional monastery like Shankara Math. Like if you go to Sringeri Shankaracharya Ashram, which is the benchmark for certain standards, you cannot take the vows of a nun. They will tell you what is there, they will tell you all kinds of nice things. They will not tell you, you are a woman, you cannot take sannyasa. They won't talk like that. They will say, what is there for a woman? Just by doing her dharma, she will attain the highest. The woman need not take a life of renunciation. You can serve, you can just live, just live in the spirit of renunciation. What is that? Why should you need renunciation? It's not necessary for women. It is not applicable. Like that, they will go round, they will not give you. It is not possible to take. But if you go to Rishikesh like this, festivals, it is just on the go. If you go to sannyasa ritual, you put YouTube. Go to YouTube. Ritual of taking sannyasa. Sannyasa initiation ritual. Put in YouTube. How many videos you will see? You will see the joke there. So it is not so difficult to get into formal initiation. What is difficult is to keep the spirit of sannyasa after renouncing. In thought, word and deed. To keep that is almost impossible. Unless a person has gone through a life of preparation. That is what Krishna means. Renunciation is very difficult to accomplish. Because it is not about renunciation. Taking the initiation into a renunciant lifestyle is very easy. It's not a big deal at all. All you need is a flight ticket to Rishikesh and you get it. It's not a problem. But the point is, after taking the vows of sannyasa, are you able to keep the vows? Or is it like one of your New Year resolution? Sannyasa is not your New Year resolution. You take some resolution and then it flies in the air in 2 months. It's not like that. So, if you want to really live what that life of renunciation is meant to be, then it is very, very difficult unless you have lived a life of karma yoga. That is what he says. But at the same time, why do you want to take a life of renunciation? You want to take a life of renunciation not for the sake of renunciation. You want to take to a life of renunciation because it promises you something. Why do you want to join Harvard? Because Harvard has a good canteen. Does anybody join Harvard because the canteen is good? If you want to eat in Harvard canteen, all you need is a friend there. You can go to the canteen, eat and come. Why should you join and study through all the courses, studying for 18 hours a day? It's not required. If you want to join Harvard, you want to earn a degree and you want to have a certain stamp of authenticity, you want to be more sellable in the market, etc., etc. So similarly, if you want to go to sannyasa, a lifestyle of renunciation does not have its own value. Remember, Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. Everything is valuable not for its own sake. Anything is valuable for one's own sake. Depending on what it gives me, what I understand that I am getting out of it, that is what gives the value to something. So, renunciation, when I am very keen to take to a life of renunciation, I have to ask myself, what am I looking for? In this context, renunciation is considered as a fit context for exclusive pursuit of self-knowledge. So, what do I want in renunciation? The state of mind, in this context of discussion, the state of mind a renunciant is supposed to have is, if a renunciant is a good renunciant, the person will have a certain state of mind. That state of mind, that disposition is very, very useful for absorbing the truth about oneself when it is taught. It is very useful for assimilating the truth about the self-knowledge. So what am I looking for in renunciation? The quality of the mind necessary for assimilating self-knowledge. So what is important here? Not the renunciation itself, but the quality of the mind that the renunciation is supposed to facilitate. So, coming to the next point. Whereas the one who is committed to a life of karma yoga and is capable of reasoning gains Brahman quickly. Yukta, yoga yukta, yoga yukto mulir means the yoga yukta means the one who is devoted to the attitude of yoga and whose thinking is guided by the Shruti, whose thinking is guided by the Veda, whose thinking is in accordance with the methodology of teaching. He thinks as guided by the methodology of teaching, and his attitude and emotion is devoted to that. He is emotionally devoted to the attitude of yoga. Emotionally devoted to the attitude of yoga gives you equanimity, the sameness of mind, evenness of mind across different situations. The thinking guided by the Shruti. What is Shruti? What is Shruti? Anybody remembers? Shruti? What is Shruti? Tell me. Shruti is not scripture. Shruti is that which is heard. Veda. Shruti means Veda. Shruti means revelation. Veda, which is in the form of sounds, which can be written also. Ideally, it should not be written. But Shruti refers to Veda primarily and the scriptures which are written in keeping with the vision of the Veda. Shruti, Smriti, Purana. Shruti here means Shruti plus. Shruti plus Smriti plus Purana plus Itihasa plus Prakarana Grantha plus everything. Sutras, all put together is meant by Shastra. Shruti here means Shastra, whose main guiding principle is the Veda, which is not written. So we should say the body of spiritual knowledge, traditional knowledge, you can say, which is headed by the Shruti. The body of traditional knowledge, which is headed by the Shruti, which is the knowledge which is heard, Veda, which is heard. It's very, very important to understand that Veda is not scripture. Scripture means that which is written. Veda is not written. Please understand this very, very clearly, because Veda is not written is absolutely essential for the Veda to qualify as a valid means of knowledge who has its own exclusive domain of validity, which validity is not available for any other means of knowledge. Only by the eternal Apaurusheyatvam. Veda has a quality called Apaurusheyatvam. It is not composed by an individual. That's what gives Veda its validity. It's very, very important. The central point of the whole Shastra is Apaurusheyatvam of Veda. That's what makes Veda a pramana. If you lose the concept of Veda is unwritten, eternal, and it is not written by anybody, composed by anybody, but it is as it is. It is discovered and transmitted orally. This is a dogma. You can say in the Western thinking it is dogma. What we say, it is to be taken with Shraddha. This assumption, it's a philosophical assumption, you can say. These are absolutes, assumptions and absolutes, which cannot be questioned. Because if you question, the whole structure of knowledge falls apart. That is why Shruti Mataha, the thinking that is guided by the Shruti, and all the supporting logic that keeps the validity of Shruti alive, that is Shruti. That is Yuktaha, the one whose thinking is cultivated according to the Shruti. What is Shruti? Veda. Okay. Shruti means Veda. In this context, Veda plus all that is built around the Veda. Veda is the fulcrum. If you lose the Veda, the whole thing goes. The fulcrum is gone, the whole wheel is gone. So it is Veda is the fulcrum around which the whole knowledge is structured. So please remember this. It's a very important point, because unless we are told this day in and day out for decades together, it will not enter the mind, because it is not the thinking with which we are brought up. We are not 5-year-old to listen to this. At least when we were 5-year-old, the mind was open. Whatever people said, we swallowed. But we need to have that innocence now. You don't need to swallow whatever people say. You cannot swallow. At least to swallow what does not contradict your logic and which is aimed at your welfare. The Veda and the whole concept that goes around the Shraddha, that is, I am asking you to have the Shraddha that is demanded from you. The Shraddha that is necessary. The Shraddha that is told as necessary for you in order to have self-knowledge is a Shraddha that is not imposed on you, but you are asked to have Shraddha because it produces a result that is beneficial for you. That is why one is asked to have Shraddha. It is not Shraddha for the sake of not offending the Veda, where you cannot offend Veda. You cannot offend God. There is nothing other than God, so God cannot get offended. So your Shraddha is not for the sake of being politically correct or being good boy or good girl in front of God and Veda. No. Your Shraddha is for the sake of your own welfare. Keeping your welfare in mind, you are asked to have Shraddha. So that's a sensible thing to do. Is it okay? You just give the benefit of doubt. If you have a problem to swallowing something that the Veda says, please give the benefit of doubt. Work on it. Keep your mind open. Work on your likes and dislikes. Over a period of time, you will understand it in perspective. Till that time, don't question the validity of what the Shastra says. Please question your thinking. This approach is useful for you to understand, because right now you may not understand, but later you should not regret that you gave up the pursuit. So please hold on. This is called Shraddha. This is very different from blind belief in dogma. That is why we should not go into Wikipedia and see that this fits the definition of dogma. One person says, this Veda is pramana, is a dogma. Because we have usually heard the word dogma in a negative connotation, right? But actual definition of dogma is neither negative nor positive. What the dogma means, what a dogma means practically, that could be negative or positive. Dogma as such is only a category. Dogma means that which cannot be, that whose validity cannot be questioned, or whose validity is accepted on face value, which cannot be questioned. That is dogma. So Veda as pramana, the Veda is apaurushayam. Veda is not composed by anybody. Veda is eternal and it is only revealed and transmitted through words, through hearing and listening. This is dogma from the Western perspective. But how does this work? Does it ever have a positive connotation in our mind? It does not have. Right? So you can say, if you say dogma, your mind gets closed. So it is not good to consider Veda as dogma from what the dogma generates. See, a word by itself is not important. There is something called as a pratyaya. Pratyaya means the mental content generated when you listen to a word. Gay. Gay. What does it generate in your mind? G-A-Y. You go in time travel 4 centuries before to Victorian England or old England, the Middle Ages. I am gay. Oh, really? That's wonderful. Because they will think gay means happy. The word gay means happy. There is another word called assault. Assault in English means to attack. In South India, among this slang, street slang, when I was growing up, the word assault means very easy. Assaulta panda, they will say. Assaulta means he finished it in such an assault manner. Literally translated. But an Englishman hears assault, assault at who? The Englishman will start panicking. Because when you say assault, it's actually mean assault. Assault rifle, you say, no? So, assault generates a different pratyaya. So, gay is a word that generates a different pratyaya in the mind for a modern person because gay means something else. The word has been hijacked by American culture to mean something else. But in classical English, gay means happy. So, a word by itself is not important. You have to use words based on what content it generates in the mind. So, based on the content it generates, the word dogma is not recommended usage for Veda unless you are a very literal person who lives by the Wikipedia and dictionary and thesaurus. Nobody thinks like that. Everybody thinks based on how the words have been influencing us. So, the word dogma is not to be used for Veda. Though technically it is dogma, practically it is not to be considered as dogma. Because it is you can say, it is a Shraddha that is required from you. When you say Shraddha, it inspires something else. Now, the way I have been unfolding the word Shraddha for you for 3 years, when you hear Shraddha, it means something positive and useful. Dogma, does it feel positive and useful? Doesn't feel. So, Shraddha. Shraddha in Veda as apaurushayam is very, very essential. So here, Yukta, all this talk I did for explaining this one word Yukta, Yoga Yukto, Munin Brahma, Nachirena Adigachadi. Yoga Yukta means the one whose thinking is guided by the Shruti. What is Shruti? Okay. And all the literature that supports Shruti. Okay. So these two is required. What is this Yukti? The one who is the Yukta, the one whose thinking is guided by the Shruti, what does he get? He gets a certain kind of objectivity, a pattern of thinking, understanding of things as they are. Such a person's understanding of life, understanding of situations, and finally the understanding of oneself is not clouded by subjectivity. The purpose of being a Yukta. Who is a Yukta? Who is a Yukta? Yes, I told you.
A person whose mind is guided by Shruti.
Good, thank you. So, a person whose mind is guided by Shruti, because it's the central point, that person's thinking is not clouded. The person's understanding of a given situation is not clouded by subjectivity. Subjectivity is accommodated in the light of the objective knowledge. Subjectivity is not denied. Subjectivity is valuable. This doesn't mean your subjective emotions are completely to be denied. It is not a life of denial. Yuktaha means a person who is available for valid knowledge in spite of subjectivity to begin with. And over a period of time, when the mind is really pure, his subjective reality is in keeping with the objective reality. So the person's natural state of mind itself is according to what the Shruti says. That is what. So there is a statement in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. In Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it talks about the state of mind of an accomplished yogi. Ritambara tatra prajna. His intelligence, his mind, his understanding, his consciousness is truth. Ritambara is clothed with reality. Ritam means the objective fact and truth, objective truth of everyday life. So that person's mind is completely available for the reality of the moment. That means your yukta has been perfected. When you are a perfected yukta, your natural thinking itself is in line with the Shastra. It will not be contradictory to the Shastra and it will not be contradictory to Pramana. Pramana means valid knowledge which includes your perception, which includes your thinking plus Shruti. Plus Shruti plus. Okay? So this is what it means, a mind available for valid knowledge. A yuktaha is a person whose thinking is naturally aligned with valid knowledge. Ideally. Or if you are in the way of preparation, whose thinking is aligned, is available for valid knowledge in spite of subjective error. Then gradually it will be naturally fully aligned with valid knowledge. So that is how it should be read. So such a person who has the attitude of devotion to the Lord across all activities, plus the thinking is cultivated according to the Shastra. For such a person attains Brahman very quickly. Here means a person attains Brahman very quickly means he attains the required qualification for the knowledge of Brahman and attains Brahman eventually. After attaining the qualified mind, when exposed to the knowledge, the assimilation of the knowledge also takes place. That's what is understood. So attaining Brahman quickly, nachirena adhigacchati, means attaining Brahman quickly is not to be understood as sannyasi, the renunciant and the karma yogi are in a race. No, Brahman is there. You keep running to Brahman, I am going for Brahman, I am going to reach Brahman, and then who runs faster? Sannyasi is on a sannyasi who is not enlightened is on Dacia, and karma yogi is on a Ferrari. It's not like that, and finally you reach Brahman. It's not like that. Attaining Brahman quickly means attaining the qualification for the knowledge of Brahman quickly. That's what it means. The preparedness is attained through a yogic life devoted to the proper thinking quickly than a life of forced renunciation. That is what is meant here. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriya sarva bhutatma bhudatma kurbannapi na likyate. The one whose mind is purified by being committed to a life of karma yoga, who has mastered the body and the sense faculties, and who knows oneself to be the self in all beings. Such a person is not affected even while doing actions. So a few things are mentioned here. Yoga yuktaha, a person who is devoted to the life of yoga, who is devoted to refining the thinking process according to the Shastra, according to the teaching. And Vishuddhatma here means whose mind is pure. Vishuddhatma means whose soul is purified. What is the translation in the other Bhagavad Gita? The red one? Anybody has the red Bhagavad Gita? No, not this. Not this red, the small red. Yes, in that. Verse number 7, chapter 5. Capitol 5. What chapter? Verse, word for verse. Now, what did you say in the beginning? Verse. Okay, verse chapter. Because here, Pujya Swamiji brings out, presents the English in such a manner to bring out the essence of the Shankaracharya's commentary, which you may not see in every. It's not a literal translation. In many Bhagavad Gita, there is a literal translation. Literal translation sometimes may be counterproductive. Verse number 7, chapter 5.
Yes, Karma Yogi, who has fully conquered his mind and mastered his senses, whose heart is pure, and who has identified himself with the self of all beings, remains untainted even though performing action.
So here, instead of Vishuddhatma, he means purity of the heart, they have said. What is this purity of the heart? Sometimes you may read as purity of the soul. If you read that Editura Herald translation.
Purified body.
Vishuddhatma, what is the translation there?
Purified body. Those united in yoga with the purified body, with the...
How did he arrive at body? Corporal purify?
Trupul.
Trupul.
Yes. Okay, somehow. They said again, trupul învins, with the body conquered somehow.
See, 3 points are given here. Yoga Yukto, which we saw now. Then Vishuddhatma, a purified self, here means whose mind is pure. Means the mind does not have, let us say, Kshina Vrittehe, let us see, whose klesha and karma are attenuated, whose pain-causing afflictions of the mind, the habit patterns of the mind are to some extent calmed down. That's what is Vishuddhatma. Let us see what Sri Shankaracharya says. Vishuddhatma, Vishuddha Sattvaha, Vichitatma. Vishuddhatma means Vishuddha Sattvaha. Sattva here means mind, the chitta. Vishuddha Sattvaha, whose mind is purified here. Whose mind is purified? Does he explain it more? Because it's a very normal, commonly used term, Shuddha Sattva, Vishuddha Sattva. Here it means so Vishuddha Sattvaha means the mind which is purified. You can see this in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. There is a verse. Why should one practice Kriya Yoga? So the Karma Yoga of Bhagavad Gita. What is discussed as Karma Yoga in Bhagavad Gita is discussed as Kriya Yoga in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Kriya Yoga, we are not talking about the branded Kriya Yoga. Branded Kriya Yoga is nothing but Hatha Yoga and a bunch of pranayama techniques with a little bit of Ishvara Pranidhana thrown in, which is a little bit of devotion thrown in. But it is fundamentally a pranayama technique. But Kriya Yoga of Patanjali means yoga of action or initial yoga, which means Tapas Swadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga, which is basically the Karma Yoga of Bhagavad Gita. Okay? So there he says, why should Kriya Yoga be practiced? Practice of Kriya Yoga is for arriving at a stability of mind and thinking, samadhir bhavanartha, in order to develop concentration and one-pointedness of mind, and klesha tanukaranartascha. Klesha means avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, avinivesha, clinging to different situations. Then likes and dislikes, which are behind our clinging. Then the sense of individuality, egoism, I and mine, the ideas of I and mine, which is behind my likes and dislikes, which is all based on ignorance. These are the kleshas. And these kleshas become attenuated. Tanukaranartascha means it becomes ineffective. It is not capable of driving a person anymore. They become weak. You have to weaken the force of the vices in the mind. The different forces of likes and dislikes in the mind become very weak. So, the mind is available for knowledge. Usually, for a common person, the knowledge is very weak. The likes and dislikes are reigning supreme. So, always our thinking is guided by our likes and dislikes. And the whole process of yoga, it reverses this entire trend of the mind, and the likes and dislikes become weak while knowledge reigns supreme. That is called Sattva Shuddhi, purified mind. Purified mind is that in which there are less compulsions And the mind is very naturally available for any conscious pursuit. How do you know the mind is pure? The less are the compulsions, lesser compulsions plus easier availability of the mind for any conscious pursuit. If you want to focus and dedicate your attention to something, your mind will be available. The force of distraction will not overwhelm you. That means the mind is pure. So that is Vishuddhatma. Yoga Yukto Vishuddhatma. Vijitatma Jitendriya. Vijitatma here means the one who has conquered oneself. Means the one who has conquered one's subjective tendencies. Vijitatma, the one who is together as a person. Jitendriya, Vijitatma here means the conquering the body and the sense organs. Here means the one who is able to rise above the compulsions of the physical organism. The one who is able to rise above the compulsions of the habit patterns that assert through our organs of action and through the organs of perception. When I want to sit in meditation, unless I am supremely comfortable in a posture, I cannot meditate. Such a problem does not arise. Because the leg is hurting a little bit, that does not disturb my concentration. I am able to rise above that doesn't mean sit in an uncomfortable posture with leg pain. I am not talking about that. What I am saying is, sit in a reasonably comfortable posture, steady and comfortable is posture, stilam sukham asanam. But no posture is perfect unless you are lying down, but you cannot meditate lying down. So, when you are sitting in a reasonably comfortable posture, sometimes the very act of sitting may become uncomfortable because of restlessness. You ask a child to sit, it will sit. There are people, who will be sitting. Keep on, the limbs are constantly moving. And then if you see some people sitting in the park, they cannot simply sit and enjoy your flower. Suddenly something will come up. You will not even think and do something. Suddenly you will discover yourself meddling with your mobile phone. After 5 minutes of spending time in mobile phone, then you will realize, I am supposed to sit quiet. No. This means the Jitendriya means a person does not have all these kind of problems. The body will not move unless I consciously want it. When I decide to sit, there will be no compulsive urges in the body. The organs of action are stabilized. The organs of action don't take me for a ride. And the organs of perception don't keep pulling my attention away for too long, or to such an extent that it is incapable for me to bring back my attention. My organs of perception are not so compulsively distracted by the different sense cravings. No, because the mind organs of perception is not only our eyes, these external faculties, these external organs, not that. Organ of perception means the visual faculty. For example, if you sit and close your eyes, visualize the flame of the lamp and think about the flame of the lamp as representing the self-evident consciousness, which is your own nature. Suppose you decide to do that. When you visualize the flame of the lamp, all kinds of things come in the mind. So many visual patterns come. So that is Indriya. So what is that? In spite of you deciding to think about the flame of the lamp, the visual faculty generates all kinds of visions. Why? It is running everywhere. You can open your eyes now. It's only an example. So when you are seeing this is a problem. When you want to visualize, that is why in meditation, the yoga is actually meditation. Okay, the practice of meditation helps you to bring these sense faculties into silence. So Karma Yoga does not mean only doing your duties with the attitude of yoga. Karma Yoga, a life of yoga, means it includes the practices of meditation also. So there are no two yogas, Raja Yoga and Karma Yoga. No. Here yoga includes all the yogas. It includes so-called Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga. everything is included. Whenever there is a dedicated mental action, it is called meditation. One-pointedness of mind is meditation. Okay? Chitta ekagrataha, the one-pointedness of mind is yoga, according to Patanjali, according to the commentaries on Patanjali. Okay? So, the mind, when it is trained in meditation, the indriyas, the one who has accomplished the science or the mastery over the sense faculties. So, if he wants to keep the mind on something, there will not be too much of internal compulsion. The flow of the mind is possible to be regulated by conscious intention. The one who is able to regulate the mind and the sense faculties and the different visualizations and the imaginations of the mind, the different processes of the mind, you are able to regulate through the conscious intention very effectively. If the mind is distracted, you are able to bring the mind back effectively in a short period of time. Such a person is Jitendriyaha, Vijitatma. Such a person is conquered oneself. That's what it means. Jitatma, Jitendriyaha means the one who has a certain level of self-mastery. Equivalent of Shamadama. Shanto Dantaha, we saw in Viveka Sudamani, Shanta Danta, the quietness of the mind and the ability and the quietness of the faculties of action. That's what it means here. And the one who knows oneself to be the self of all beings. So it's a sequence here. First you become, you develop the attitude of yoga. Then you discipline your thinking according to Yukti, according to the Shruti plus. Then that living a life like that purifies your mind. And the force of the vices become less and the force of virtue becomes more, then you will be able to practice meditation. And that practice of meditation makes you Vijitatma Jitendriya. That makes you one of a conquered self and the one whose sense faculties and the organs of action and the physical organism is under control. And under control means here, under control without pressure. It is not sitting on thorns. Control need not mean pressure. Here in yoga, self-control should not mean pressure. There must be no pressure inside because you have to follow a discipline. Following a discipline without inner pressure, that's what means self-control. It is not a person who is very heroic, biting the teeth and doing all great disciplines and who is sacrificing the desire. There is no sacrifice involved here. You don't sacrifice anything. In fact, if you are indulging in your senses, you are sacrificing the great joy of yourself. But if you are letting go of all the small pleasures, we have two words, we have two words in Tamil. We say Sitrinbam, Perimbam. Sitrinbam means the small joys. The small joys of life. Sense-based pleasure. Perimbam, the liberation is called as the great joy. We don't call liberation as, this absence of everything, emptiness. We don't say, and who wants emptiness? Somebody has a lot of things in life. He has car, he has people, and he has company, and he has name and fame and everything. And then you want to go and market emptiness for him. So if a person is successful, and the person is happy, and the person has no problem with the success, has a healthy attitude, why should the person look for emptiness? Does it make any sense? So you don't market emptiness, you market fullness. Whatever you have is incomplete, it is small. There is something which is infinite, which is your own nature. Seek that. So that is how the teaching begins the motivation. Motivating you for the teaching takes the most natural tendency of the mind. The most natural tendency of the mind is to look for more. Why? Because you are infinite. You can never settle for anything that is less than infinite. Everywhere you want to be the best. Everywhere you want to be. Even though you may be the stupid person, you like to be appreciated as a very intelligent person. Whenever somebody appreciates you as, you can see this, people who are physically challenged, they have any problem with the physical body, they take extra efforts to shine in something else, to prove themselves. Why it happens? Because there is an inherent tendency to expand. Why? Because you are identified with a limitation, you cannot settle down for a limitation. That is why the more and more you achieve things, the more you will achieve, you will want to achieve more. The more things you achieve, you are prone to achieve more. A non-achiever, a lazy person may not achieve things. A person who is fundamentally an achiever cannot stop at any achievement. You have achieved this, that, then you look for more challenges. You look for higher challenges, higher and higher challenges. That is the nature of growth. That is the nature of the mind, natural expression of the mind. That is why you are told, the one who realizes Brahman attains the highest. So the teaching takes into account the most natural nature of the person. So a person who is self-controlled here means the one who is not doing sacrifices, the one who is very happily following the discipline, the one who is very happily and naturally aligned and together and aligned with the objective valid knowledge. Such a person is what is described here. Yogic self-control means no pressure. Okay? Plus he is talking about the knowledge. Sarva Bhuta Atma, the one who knows oneself to be the self in all beings. That means the person who has the vision of the Supreme Self is not affected even while doing actions. Step by step is self. So after acquiring the mastery of the mind, living a life of Dharma, in Sadhana Panchakam, there is a sequence. There are 40 steps. We covered Sadhana Panchakam in the Vedanta class before. Vedo nityam adhiyatam taduttam karmasvanushti yatam trene sasya vidhiyatam avachade kamye matistechyatam. Step by step he takes you. Karma, upasana. May you be devoted to a life of Dharma. Then that will purify you. Then cultivate desirelessness and may you cultivate the attitude of yoga. That will purify you further. May you cultivate thinking according to the Shruti. That will purify your thinking further. Then, after living a life of self-purification, after living a life guided by Dharma, the mind is available for meditation. When the mind is available for meditation, may you practice the different meditation techniques, upasana, etc. After purifying through karma, may you be devoted to upasana, and the upasana gives you steadiness of the mind. The mind that is steadied by the process of upasana, mind purified by karma, made steady by upasana, is available for knowledge. And when the mind comprehends the truth, such a person is not affected even while doing actions. So actions fundamentally don't affect you. This knowledge makes you see the fact. Because fundamentally you are not affected by action and result of action. You have to purify and make yourself available for this knowledge, and when you realize this knowledge, you are liberated while you are alive. Further discussion on this. From the verse number 8 onwards, we will go in the next class. Om Swasti Prajabhya Paripalayantam Nyayena Margena Mahim Mahishaha Go Brahmanebhya Shubhamastu Nityam Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Kale Varshatu Parjanyaha Prithivi Sashisharini Deshoyam Shobarahitaha Brahmana Santu Nirbhaya. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Atato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Mritam Gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Hari Om Namah Parvati Pataye